Well, a very good morning to you if you've just joined us for our special coverage here of the funeral service of the late struggle stalwart, Mme Gertrude Shope. We're live to you from Wits University here in Johannesburg, and this is where that funeral service will be taking place. In case you missed it a little bit earlier on, my colleague Natasha Piri is at the family home in Centurion, and that's where a valediction ceremony will be taking place. We'll cross to her a little bit later on. SABC News political reporter Samkele Maseko will also join us in just a couple of moments as well, talking about the life and times of Mme Gertrude Shope. We're talking about a trade unionist, a former president of the ANC Women's League, and also a woman who was in the trenches, part of the leadership of the ANC's military wing, Umkhonto weSizwe, where this was in exile. A lot of her work had been documented in terms of, her contribution towards the attainment of freedom and, the fight for women's rights here in South Africa. But a lot has not been said, or much has been said, about her contribution from exile. We'll talk about that in just about a few moments. But President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver the eulogy here at Wits University a little bit later on this morning. And you recall, of course, back in 2014, she had been honored Istwalande Siaparangwe, and that is the highest honor for someone who has made an indelible contribution towards freedom for South Africa. And I think it was at the age of 29. Yes, I'd read up about that. At the age of 29, she'd resigned from her post as a teacher due to the fact that Bantu education had been introduced. But I want to bring in someone who knows a bit more about the history of Mme Gertrude Shope, and that is Professor Natasha Erlank, who's a professor of history at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you so much for joining us so early this morning. So much to be said about Mme Gertrude Shope, and from what we've heard and read about, at least there is documentation of her fight here in South Africa, but not much is said about the contribution that she made from exile.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here sharing the news of this important woman. Yeah. A very sad occasion, though. So, Mme Gertrude Shope was a relatively young woman when she went into exile. So she had been a member of the Federation of South African Women during the 1950s. By the 1960s, she had become involved as a helper, particularly working with Bram Fischer, and it was on his suggestion, it appears, that she first went into exile in '66, initially to Prague and then ending up in Zambia, where she headed the Lusaka office of the ANC in exile. But it's important to reflect upon what she did while she was out the country. Yeah. She travelled fairly widely while she was in exile, returning in 1990. One of the things that she did was, by the early 1970s, she was helping to head up the women's section of the ANC. When the ANC went into exile, it dissolved the Women's League. And the ANC Women's League was only reconstituted in 1990 when the ANC had returned to South Africa. So she headed up the women's section. She was also responsible for the Lusaka office. And if you look at ANC policy documents from that period, you can see that she's really, really active. She was involved in a series of meetings that took place in the 1980s when the National Party was, at that point, still covertly visiting the ANC in exile, trying to discover ways forward to what became our new democratic dispensation. Yeah. She was also very instrumental in helping to set up women's support services in exile. So she's fondly remembered as Mme Shope by many of the younger activists because she was a senior woman by then. Yeah. And it was under her encouragement and the encouragement of some other leaders that a series of homes were set up for young women who were falling pregnant in exile. These homes were known as the Charlottes, after Charlotte Maxeke. Yes. And she was supportive of these young women in trying to get them settled into a routine with their children in the first years of their life. But let me leave it there for the moment and come back to you.
And in fact, was it in 2003 that you interviewed Masha? Was it 2003?
It was 2005. I got the dates wrong.
Yes, right, it was in 2005.
I was lucky enough.
Fortunate. You interviewed her in 2005, and I can only but imagine from the many sentiments that have been shared about her, the many roles that she played, trade unionist, fighting for workers' rights. What stood out for you in that interview in 2005, if you look back to what you shared with Gertrude Shope?
She was still fiery, you know, and I was so impressed by that, because we often associate that kind of drive with a younger generation. It's also something we often associate, you know, more with men. So I think she was still an advocate, a passionate advocate for the ANC. She shared with me a number of publications she had made. I was interviewing her about the gender gains the ANC had made in the first 10 years of democracy. Democracy, first 10 years, 2004. She was still a very powerful figure. We have to remember, of course, that, I mean, she was also very instrumental in some of what happened in the early 1990s. She came back into South Africa. She was the first president of the ANC Women's League when she came back into the country. There was a fierce battle between her and Winnie Madikizela Mandela, thank you. She was also one of only 3 women present at first during in the initial CODESA talks to set up the new democratic South Africa. So she moved quite quietly from behind the scenes, but she was a notable figure.
Yeah. Prof, right on time. We were left with about 1 minute. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us on this day, of course, here live from Wits University at the Great Hall. This is where the funeral service of struggle stalwart, the late Gertrude Shope, will be taking place. And the ceremony, as it is, while we wait here at Wits University, there's a valediction ceremony which is taking place at the family home in Centurion. That's where my colleague Natasha Puri is. We'll connect with her a little bit later on. But Professor Natasha Erlank, Professor of History at the University of Johannesburg, thank you very much indeed for your time. All right, back to the studio for now.